How would you counter the argument that India has a long way to go when it comes to sufficiently addressing the job creation problem? And you say that the budget is doing a good job of addressing that challenge, or do you think there were some things that could have been focused upon a lot more?
So look, the book is about talking about India at 100, so 2047. So we have to do this emphasis on employment, not just in one budget, but consecutive budgets for several years, because that's how the second pillar in my book, which is social and economic inclusion, among the four pillars, will really get fructified, because I have always believed that a job in the formal sector is actually the way to really not only spur that family, but at the same time actually generations. I can't give you a better example than my own. My father, he lost his father when he was 7 years old, could only finish school, but he was privileged enough to get a job in Indian Railways, albeit in the clerical grade. But as a result, he was able to educate me and my brother, two siblings, and because of that education, we were able to actually get the opportunities that we got. I think that illustrates how not only did he actually help the family, but he's also helped generations, right? So I think these experiences of mine actually really make me believe that jobs actually are extremely critical, especially jobs in the formal sector, because it provides identity. Think about it. I think every viewer will agree that each one of us remembers the day when we got our first job, because it means so much to us, our identity. And therefore, good job creation, high quality job creation is, I think, really critical, both from a social and an economic perspective. That's what will create the burgeoning middle class. And I can give you one more example. Take, for instance, the city of Detroit in Michigan. Now, of course, in the last 30 years, it's gotten hollowed out more because U.S. manufacturing itself has actually suffered. But in the after the Second World War, the auto majors actually, the jobs that were created there, manufacturing jobs, created this entire city, the entire middle class in cities like these. That's what India needs. And in the book, I actually show, for instance, if we take the tier 2 cities in India, 50 cities, each one of them has a population that actually is at least as much that of Michigan. And even with our growth, we actually will not yet reach the $15,000 per capita, GDP per capita in some of these tier 2 cities up until I think 2040. The reason is that I use that is because today at $15,000 GDP per capita, China, they find the labor costs are actually are becoming uncompetitive. Right. So I think in the tier 2 cities, we can generate the kind of jobs, and the labor will continue to be competitive in these tier 2 cities. They have the population that can therefore provide a significant amount of labor for our manufacturing sector firms. So the emphasis on job creation through policy is something that is really critical. And
formal job creation,
job creation, and there manufacturing plays a critical role, and therefore across 2 or 3 chapters I actually cover this in great detail, because I have firmly believed, and I think emphasizing this is important, especially in the light of some commentary that seems to suggest that manufacturing is not important for India, or that India has missed the manufacturing bus. I believe that it is policy failures over the last 30 years that has basically what has led to Indian manufacturing not being able to grow as much. Why? Because think about a manufacturing sector firm. What are the inputs to manufacturing? It's basically labor, land, capital, power, logistics in order to transport their produce, and scale, because economies of scale actually matter a lot for reducing average costs. Now, on each one of these, if you take labor, for instance, in 1991, when the IMF program was administered, labor reforms were a part of that. That was one of the recommendations. Here we are 33 years later, the labor bill has been 4 codes, those have been passed, but the subordinate legislation still needs to be passed. So, in all these areas, which we economists call as factor markets, these are because markets for factors of production, we've not really reformed these markets. Our land markets still continue to be very distorted, as do our labor markets too. And even our capital actually, there's been good progress, but we can still grow significantly. If you take, for instance, the ratio of private credit to GDP, in many of the G7 economies, the private credit to GDP ratio is actually in excess of 200%. In contrast, in 2020, if you look at the private credit to GDP ratio in India, it was 58%. So look at the runway that we have for credit creation, especially for our MSMEs, for our individuals. So capital also actually there's a lot to do there. And then now there's been good emphasis on power, logistics, I think, through the infrastructure in the last 10 years. But we equally need to actually recognize that our firms tend to be very small. We have the problem of dwarfism in our economy, where our firms age but they don't grow. And
why is that?
Why is that? Because oftentimes our incentives are, we provide perverse incentives. Take, for instance, the way the labor laws are, in the old labor laws, right? If a firm exceeds 100 employees, then it has to start complying with just about all and sundry on the labor regulation. What does that do then? If you're the entrepreneur, your firm has basically, you've grown your firm to 95 employees.
Yeah.
Now you see that if you grow it to 100, then you're going to have to comply with all kinds of regulations. You're a rational entrepreneur. What would you do? Basically say, you'll start now. Is the time when maybe your cousin brothers, or maybe your driver, or maybe your maid actually start becoming very important, because you want to start a firm in their names rather than actually grow your firm. What does this do? In contrast, if you basically grew your firm to, let's say, 500 employees, vis-a-vis 5 firms, each one of which has 100 employees, the 500 strong firm enjoys economies of scale, because the entire fixed costs are being distributed over a much bigger denominator.
Right.
But the 100 employee firms are not enjoying that benefit. They're not getting the economies of scale. As a result, their average costs are much lower. And this is something which we really have to work on. And I'll give you one more.
Yes.
I think one more piece of evidence is really critical, because this is telling in terms of what we need to do on this phenomenon of dwarfism. If you compare India and the United States, a typical, and I'm taking an average firm. This is a study that was published in the Quarterly Journal of Economics. A 30-year-old firm in the United States generates 7 times as many jobs as a 5-year-old firm did in the United States. In contrast, in India, the 30-year-old firm generates only 1.4 times as many jobs as the 5-year-old firm did. So think about it. Actually, when the firm ages in the United States, it's creating 7 times as many jobs. Right. In India, it's only 40% more. When every firm actually is, let's say, generating 5 times as many jobs, then obviously you'll have a lot more job creation. In contrast, we have dwarfs in our, So these are aspects.
So what's the way out according to
policy? Policy. I think, as I said, actually, our policies have kept our markets for factor markets, land, labor, capital, they have power as well, they're distorted. So while we reformed our product markets in 1991, we opened them up for competition. Our factor markets are still not open for competition.
Right.
So reforms actually, and therefore I will place the emphasis again and again on policy to reform the factor markets. Take agriculture, and I'll give you an example where basically the APMC Act or the Essential Commodities Act. Let's just talk about the Essential Commodities Act. It was passed in the 1960s when India faced food shortages. And what is an intrinsic feature of agriculture? That intrinsic feature is that supply is seasonal, but demand is all through the year.
Sure.
And when supply is seasonal and demand is all through the year, you have to store. Because what got produced, let's say during the Kharif season or the Rabi season, that has to be eaten all through the year. So you have to store. And yet the Essential Commodities Act does what? It basically equates almost all storage to hoarding. I'm sure you remember the Hollywood movies where actually, at least I remember, the Bollywood movies, where there's this character Jeevan used to come basically be shown as a retailer who was basically shown to be hoarding. He was storing, and what does that do? That basically completely removes incentives for storage infrastructure to develop, and it hurts whom? It hurts a small farmer, because he doesn't have the deep pockets to be able to store his produce. And so he has to go and sell it, when there is a supply binge, and therefore he doesn't get good prices. Even the APMC is the same thing. Basically the intermediary ends up in if 100 rupees is basically being generated as value added between the small farmer or the farmer and the intermediary, the small farmer gets only 10 rupees out of that 100. This is evidence. And that is because of the lack of competition there. And I think these are aspects that actually really need to be, the emphasis needs to be on policy, and for policy to remove many of these shackles that we have placed, on our economic participants. Make no mistake, Indian entrepreneurs are, I think, are best of the lot. If we basically remove these shackles, as we've seen in so many sectors, there is no reason why our entrepreneurs cannot basically go and deliver as good on manufacturing or on agriculture or any of these sectors. I have absolutely no doubt about that.
To stay up to speed with the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.